you just wanted to get better, a little more success, a little more happiness. So you signed up for a leadership workshop, like thousands before you. They said it was cutting edge, transformational, and at first, it was. You felt seen, you felt powerful, you felt like you'd finally found your people. Then they asked for a secret. Just as a sign of commitment, they said. It seemed harmless, so you gave it. Then they asked for something bigger, then something you'd never want anyone to see. And before you knew it, you were trapped, branded, blackmailed, believing it was all your fault. This isn't a horror movie. It's NXIVM, a self-help group that promised to change lives and did, just not in the way anyone expected. And the scariest part, most people didn't even realize they were caught until it was far too late. Stick around, because by the end of this story, you'll see just how easy it is for smart, capable people to fall into the perfect trap. You didn't walk into a cult. You walked into a seminar room. Bright lights, sharp suits, big promises. In 1998, a man named Keith Raniere and a former psychiatric nurse, Nancy Salzman, launched something new. They called it NXIVM, spelled weird, so it felt exclusive. You didn't just join NXIVM, you earned it. Courses weren't cheap, thousands up front. But that was the appeal. If it costs this much, it must be worth it, right? You sat through sessions called the Executive Success Program. You learned how to unblock yourself, unlock your hidden potential, and you heard whispers. Keith Raniere isn't just another guru. He's a genius, IQ off the charts, a man who could change the world if you were lucky enough to follow him. You watched Nancy Salzman, called Prefect, lead emotional breakthroughs that felt real. You wore a color-coded sash, your status on display like martial arts belts. Moving higher, the more you trained, the more you paid, the more you proved yourself. And if you were really lucky, you might even get to meet Vanguard himself. Vanguard, that's what they called Keith, a title he chose, not for humility, but because in his favorite video game, the Vanguard was the one who conquered all enemies. And if you still had any doubts, they vanished in 2009. That's when Keith Raniere managed the unthinkable. The Dalai Lama, one of the most respected spiritual leaders in the world, agreed to visit NXIVM headquarters in Albany. The group spent over $2 million to make it happen. Photos hit the press. Smiling faces. Keith Raniere on stage, sharing the spotlight with holiness itself. It didn't matter that some of the Dalai Lama's advisors had warned him to stay away. To the outside world, and to you, it looked like confirmation. NXIVM wasn't just legitimate, it was extraordinary. Because if even the Dalai Lama could stand beside Keith Raniere, how could you ever question the path you were on? Despite the strange rituals, despite the odd titles and endless upsells, NXIVM didn't look like danger, it looked like opportunity. The actors, the millionaires, the spiritual endorsements, they weren't red flags, they were green lights. You didn't know, not yet, that the entire structure was built for one thing, not your success, your surrender. But you weren't just signing up for a course. You were stepping into a machine built to find you and break you. NXIVM didn't cast a wide net. They targeted the dreamers, the healers, the ones who wanted more out of life and who were willing to work for it. If you were grieving, they said you were ready for transformation. If you were lonely, they said you'd finally found your family. If you were ambitious, They said they could unlock your true greatness. The first contacts weren't cold or corporate. They were warm, affectionate, love bombs disguised as mentorship. You weren't just welcomed, you were celebrated. You weren't just seen, you were chosen. And once you felt that rush, that feeling that maybe, finally, you belonged, you didn't realize it wasn't the destination. It was the beginning. At first, everything feels right. The classes, the breakthroughs, the new friends who get you like no one else ever has. You feel like you're climbing a mountain while everyone else is stuck on the ground. But slowly, almost too slowly to notice, something shifts. Maybe it's the friend who cuts off their family overnight. Maybe it's the instructor who tells you that questioning is just your programming, and if you resist, it means you're failing yourself. You start using words you never said before. Suppressives, ethical breaches, higher purpose. Words that make you believe they're wrong, and you're right, for cutting people out. And if you ever express doubt, you're told to take another class, pay more money, go deeper. And the deeper you went, the more the rules shifted. Information control became the new normal. You were discouraged from reading outside books, from watching mainstream media, from talking to anyone who wasn't on the path, family and friends who questioned NXIVM. They weren't worried about you. They were suppressing your growth. And if you dared to doubt anything, it wasn't a sign of critical thinking. It was a sign of weakness. So you doubled down. Another class, another pledge, another promise to unblock yourself. And every breakthrough they engineered, every tearful confession you made in front of the group, made it that much harder to imagine life outside their walls. Meanwhile, the costs keep stacking up. Thousands for workshops, new uniforms to show your rank, required intensives that never seem to end. But every time you hesitate, they remind you, you're not spending money, you're investing in yourself. And the more you invested, the deeper you sank. You didn't notice the cracks forming. Not yet. Then, a crack in the perfect facade. Kristen Snyder, a student, disappears after attending an intensive in Alaska. Her last words, scrawled in a suicide note. I was brainwashed by Keith Raniere's group. Leadership brushes it off. They say it's not their fault. They say it's just her limiting beliefs catching up to her. And you want to believe them. Because if you don't, you have to ask the question no one wants to answer. What exactly have you been pulled into? By now, NXIVM isn't just a course. It's your friendships, your identity, your future. Walking away doesn't feel like quitting a seminar. It feels like burning your whole life down. And that's exactly how Keith Raniere designed it. You're deep in now. You've sacrificed relationships. You've spent thousands. You believed in the dream. So when someone you trust, maybe a mentor, maybe a friend, invites you into a secret women's group, it doesn't seem strange. It feels like an honor, like you've made it to the inner circle. But to join, you have to offer something first. Collateral, a private photo, a confession, something personal, something painful that they'll hold on to, just in case you ever betray their trust. You tell yourself it's symbolic, everyone's doing it. Then the demands start. Calorie restrictions, exhausting drills, late-night obedience tests. And then the unthinkable. They ask you to strip naked and lie down. They tell you it's a symbol of empowerment. You want to believe them. You hear the hum of the cauterizing pen. You smell the burning flesh. You scream, but you stay still. Because you've been told this pain is part of your transformation. What you don't know, not yet, is that the brand searing into your skin isn't a symbol of the four elements, like they promised. It's Keith Raniere's initials, KR, permanently carved into your body, without your consent, without your understanding, without your soul ever being the same again. But the branding wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of your obedience tests. At all hours of the night, you'd get a text, one word, ready, and you had 60 seconds to respond, no matter where you were, no matter what you were doing. If you didn't reply in time, everyone in your group was punished. It wasn't about discipline, it was about control, about training you to react without thinking, about turning obedience into instinct. So when they told you to suffer, you suffered. When they told you to obey, you obeyed. And when they told you to be branded, to be owned, you stayed silent. You stayed still, because by then, you didn't know how to say no anymore. You couldn't even imagine a way out. But the cracks were growing, whispers, doubts, survivors beginning to speak, quietly at first. And then, in October 2017, the secret explodes into public view. The New York Times runs the story. Front page, headlines scream, "Inside a secretive group where women are branded." And overnight, the world finally sees NXIVM, not as a self-help movement, but as a machine of blackmail, sexual exploitation, and psychological warfare. For years, you thought you were climbing higher, but the truth was simpler. You weren't rising, you were falling deeper. The moment the New York Times story hits, the house of cards starts to fall, but not fast enough. You're still trapped. You're still wondering if anyone will believe you, or if your collateral will destroy you first. Then the headlines multiply. Investigations, raids, arrest warrants. In March 2018, Keith Raniere, Vanguard himself, is tracked down to a luxury villa in Mexico. Armed officers storm in. He hides in a closet. That's your great leader, cowering in the dark, while his followers take the fall. A few weeks later, Allison Mack, the Hollywood actress who once smiled and recruited you, is in handcuffs too. The arrests snowball. Nancy Salzman, Lauren Salzman, Claire Bronfman, Kathy Russell, all the ones you once trusted, exposed. In court, the truth spills out like blood from a wound. Secret recordings, branding ceremonies, blackmail files hidden in basements. You listen to the testimonies, and it feels like hearing your own nightmares spoken out loud. Guilty pleas pour in. Allison Mack, Nancy Salzman, Lauren Salzman, Claire Bronfman, one after another. They admit it. They knew, they helped, they lied. Only Keith Raniere fights. But in 2019, after 6 brutal weeks of testimony, the verdict comes back. Guilty on all counts. In 2020, the sentence is announced: 120 years in federal prison. You should feel free now. And in some ways, you do. But healing isn't a straight line. Survivors like Sarah Edmondson, India Oxenberg, and others step into the light, telling their story. They speak for the ones who are still trapped in their minds. They speak for the ones who didn't make it out. And in every word, there's a question that echoes louder and louder. How many more groups like this are still out there, hiding behind good intentions, waiting for the next you to walk through their door? You might think, this could never happen to me. I'm too smart, too skeptical, too independent. But the truth is, nobody joins a cult. You join a movement, a cause, a community. You don't wake up one day and say, I think I'll hand over my mind and body to a stranger. You wake up one day after 100 tiny steps you didn't even realize you were taking, each one disguised as something good. Growth, empowerment, belonging. Keith Raniere didn't control people with chains. He controlled them with promises. Promises that felt true until leaving meant losing everything. And here's the part that's hardest to admit. You don't have to be weak to get trapped. You just have to be human. We all want to be better. We all want to belong. We all want to matter. That's what NXIVM preyed on. And that's why the danger isn't over. Right now, there are other leaders out there, other groups, other promises, waiting for the next person who just wants a little more out of life, waiting for the next you. So if you take anything from this story, let it be this: growth should never cost you your voice. Success should never demand your soul. And anyone who asks for your loyalty first, before your questions, your doubts, your freedom, isn't offering you a future, they're offering you a cage. And the only way to stay free is to never hand them the key.